The following Learn a Latte event was held live via Zoom on Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024. Good morning, parents and guardians. Thank you so much for joining us today, bright and early on this chilly October morning, which is why I have the fire fire going in the background. I'm Christopher Chiakulas, a post-secondary counselor, and welcome to our latest Learn a Latte session on student involvement and college admissions. Learn a Latte is a student services series that focuses on different topics related to your student's life at Hersey or life after Hersey, hence the spelling of latte. And this topic today really covers both of those things. What will your students possibly be doing while they're at Hersey, and does it have to be at Hersey, or does it have to be just while they're at Hersey? We'll get into that. But then, of course, how that relates to then their life after Hersey as they're applying to colleges and things like that, to see what they're looking for in student involvement and activities, and kind of as they build their resume. So we got, as I said in the email to everyone, we got a lot of great questions, a lot of common questions, and we'll try to really address as many of those things as we can in this half hour or so. As you've probably, those of you who are senior parents or a little bit older and have heard me talk before, or seen some more of my things versus freshman parents, a lot of the college process the answer is it depends. So we're going to get some perspectives, but we'll try to talk in general terms, but just know that there may not be a set answer specifically that covers every school and every possibility. I want to start really quickly before we get into the questions of showing everyone where they can find information about what Hersey has to offer in terms of activities and involvement. So if you go to the Hersey website under students, there is something called the student megadoc. Now there's also a parent megadoc that has great information, but I'm just showing you from the student side, right? So on the student megadoc, you can see a variety of tools for the students to know, but I want to focus on this top row where it says co-curricular information, activities, athletics, fine arts, a lot of great info. If they click on activities, and hopefully this is all still being seen. Morgan, do you see all this? Okay, so there's only one who's I can see. Excuse me, you can see all the different activities, and it's broken down by academic, some athletic ones, career, competitive, cultural, and so on. So there's a lot of ways to get involved, and then you would click on a specific one to get more information. So I'll click on the Greek Club since this is mine, and you can see like when they meet and where and how to get connected, or for your students, really, they should be the ones getting connected, and so on. So a lot of great opportunities. And so many so that on next Thursday, the 10th, October 10th at, sorry, I'm trying to stop my sharing here. Thursday, October 10th during lunches, students are invited to the Carter Gym for a fall activities fair. So a lot of those groups you just saw will be setting up a table, and students can go during their lunch period to walk around and meet the students who are involved and sign up and learn more about it. So really encourage your students next Thursday, the 10th, instead of, encourage them to save that $8 going to Jimmy John's across the street or whatever, and pack a sandwich and go to the gym and hear about all those important activities, because that's a great way. You could look at that spreadsheet, but to really talk to the students who are involved and see more about it is really key. So that's just an example of what we have going on at Hersey. So when it comes to activities and even courses, my personal kind of philosophy when students and parents ask, well, like, what courses do I need to take for college, and like what should my student be involved in, or all those, my default answer is typically, what does the student want to do? What do they want their high school experience to look like? If they're going to trudge themselves into a class every day, hating it, and they're only doing it because they think it will possibly help them get into a specific subset of classes, or if they're only going to a practice or meeting every day after school or every week after week because they just think like this will be the key to getting into a super selective school, and they just dread every moment of it. Then what's the point? What's the point of living high school in like the future? Like live in the moment, do what you want to do, and I guarantee you, this isn't a depends. I guarantee you there will be opportunities for your student. Will it rule out some opportunities if they do one route versus another? Maybe. But again, there will be options. I firmly believe this. And so I hate to see a student kind of trudge through high school, not enjoying anything they're doing, but only doing it like for the future instead of living in the one time they have for high school. So that's kind of my soapbox TED talk for it to start. And you may sit there and say, okay, that sounds great in theory, Mr. C, but like, no, we got to figure out what these schools really, really want. And if they have to suck it up, they have to suck it up. So that's, again, personal choice and opinion. But let's hear from somebody else, not just me, on what they think, somebody who works in admissions. So I'm going to invite in our guest now, Morgan, to come join us and introduce yourself and tell us who you are. And then we'll get started from there. So welcome, Morgan.
Thanks, Mr. C, and good morning, everyone. So wonderful to be with you all here this morning. My name is Morgan Farrar. I use she, her pronouns. I am a Senior Assistant Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Washington University in St. Louis, or WashU. So for those that might not be familiar with us as an institution, right, or just starting kind of the college exploration journey, WashU is a medium-sized private research institution located in St. Louis, Missouri. We, being a research institution, have 5 academic divisions, so you can get the arts and sciences, engineering, business, art, and architecture. But generally speaking, we are a highly selective institution. So as Mr. C said, well, when we're answering questions today, I'll be speaking in sort of broader terms, right? But always informed by what it is be like to be a highly selective institution, right? Your students might have really aspirational goals to go to a school like WashU or to go to a school even more selective than we are. But I think generally speaking, we look for things that are also very similar to a lot of institutions. So we'll hope to touch on all of that today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So we just looked at all the really great opportunities that we have here at Hersey. So our colleges, but maybe parents are sitting there saying, well, my student is doing something outside of Hersey. They're a ballerina, they're into fencing, they're involved in church, they are in community theater, they're a scout. We have all these students here, those aren't just made up things, right? So what about that? Do they have to be involved here at Hersey in one of those, links from the Google Doc, or how do colleges view involvement outside of the school that they go to?
Yeah, we actually get this question a lot because I think folks think, well, I should be making use of the resources that my school provides. And that is definitely the case if your student is really driven by their options at Hersey, right? So Mr. C did a great job of saying, there's no perfect formula. We want students to be excited about what they're involved in. That'll be kind of a through line through a lot of the answers to my questions this morning. But I think if your student is just as excited about something outside of school, that is amazing, right? We want our students to be passionate about what they do. We want them to figure out what they're passionate about, period. And so if that means that they have to explore options outside of school, that is just as wonderful. I think it's great to see students involved in something in their high school community, right? Because I think a lot of us are looking for students who value community in lots of different ways, right? There's no perfect equivalent to what that could mean extracurricularly. But having a little bit of involvement in school would be great, right? And even if it's a club and then they're doing a ton of stuff outside of school, that can be just as awesome. So no firm ratio or it needs to be this way or that. Both in and out of school involvement can be just as awesome.
Okay, great. So keeping on the theme of outside of school, we do have students who have a lot of responsibilities, right? They have to watch their siblings after school, or they have to work. This may surprise some parents, but we do have students who work 30, 40 hours a week and go to high school. So is that something that students should put on their college application, or do colleges even care about that? Or because that's not really an extracurricular that it's just, it is what it is. I guess I'm out of luck.
I love that we're talking about this. This is one of the subjects when it comes to extracurriculars that I get very impassioned about. So I appreciate the option to highlight it. Your students should absolutely be highlighting this type of involvement. So if they're taking care of family, siblings, elders, community members, right? If they have a part-time job, even if it's like 5 hours a week, right? A lot of this process for admissions officers is context driven, right? Trying to understand the context of a student's resources, their high school, their home environment, and that even applies to extracurriculars. So by including these components, we now on the side of on the admissions desk can say, oh, this is why if a student's working, let's say 40 hours a week, right, and they don't have any other involvement or maybe one other thing, I'll say that makes sense because they're working basically a full-time job on top of going to high school. So I'm not going to expect them to be doing 17 other things. But if they don't include that, then I'm left wondering kind of what else is taking up their time. And that applies to anything a student does, right? It's not just kind of responsibilities or things tied to income, right? Or needing to support a car payment or whatever reason students might be doing these sorts of things. It's anything a student does that's important to them. We want to know about it. What's taking up their time outside of school time and homework time. So absolutely should be included, and it can be incredibly valuable because it demonstrates similar qualities that some of extracurriculars do, right? Compassion and support for a family or community, resilience, hardworking, like all the sorts of qualities that come with anyone who's working, doing those sorts of things. So they can be just as helpful, but definitely should be included if your students doing anything of the sort.
Okay, great. So that's definitely an important thing to note. And I will say, kind of side note, that on the Common App, those are actually categories. Family responsibilities is actually a category. Job, like so, it's on there with the full intent that students put those on there, or else it wouldn't even be an option, right? Um, so something like that could take up a lot of students' time. But let's say a student also did find they found their passion, right? And they're like, I just want to do this all day. I want to be in theater all day. I want to be in band all day. Like I'm, on a sport that like we have, before school weight training, after school practice, weekend games. Like there's like not a lot of time to do anything else. Does it look bad on an application if the student just has this one thing and they might be super passionate about it, but just or one category like I do volleyball all year, school, club, tournament, whatever. Does that look bad, so to speak? Should they try to find some way to diversify their involvement, even with the extra 10 minutes they have during the day, or how does a college look at someone that has like just that one thing, but it takes up a lot of time?
Yeah, we see this. I won't say I've seen everything in this process, but I've seen a lot of different things. And this is a very common category for extracurriculars, right? As a student has a love, they invest all their time into it. It's what we might call like a pointy extracurricular list, right? It's very focused, as opposed to a student who's involved in a lot of different things. I mean, it can be just as compelling, right? Speaking of those subsections and resources provided by applications, right? There's that component for hourly involvement and also how many like weeks in a year. And so we look at that sort of thing because if a student says only has 3 activities and it's volleyball, 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 or theater, 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 but I see that they're doing that type of theater involvement for a third of the year for 20 hours a week, again, like that part-time job, right? Or any extracurricular, I'm going, okay, so obviously they're not going to be slotting in a time outside of this. They've got these late night rehearsals. Any extra time is going to be for homework, right? Or they're traveling for games. So it's again about that context. I wouldn't say it's bad or good. I would say that I think it can be, as long as the student is flushing out kind of reasoning or making it clear to us why, or using the hourly component, right, to really flush out how they're involved, right, and the ways that they're involved, then it can be just as compelling. But I think it's always important to note if a student, just because a student does one thing all the time, doesn't mean they don't have different interests. So encouraging students to still take the chance to explore and change if they're deciding not to do those things anymore. And that sort of flip or change is also just so, it's fine. It's not going to mean anything if they suddenly stop those activities they did really intensively. But they always have that room to change if they're interested to.
Okay, perfect. On the flip side of that, what if there's a student that is not necessarily in one time consuming thing? I know a lot of freshmen maybe are coming in and they're like, they keep telling us to get involved, but like, I don't have anything right now. I'm maybe not on a sport that meets, every single day just yet. Um, like, should that student who has all this time, should they look to get involved in like as many different things as possible? Should they try to diversify with clubs and academic groups or cultural clubs, like, or like, could it be where they go from nothing to too many things, or is there like I know sometimes people want to know a limit, like, do we have to have I just actually saw this kind of side note on the Paying for College 101 Facebook group that I'm sure some parents on here might be on. And please use with caution and feel free to ask us if you see anything that looks suspect. But this was a question I just saw yesterday. Like, does my kid have to be in sports? So for those students who maybe are just starting or they're not sure, do you have any tips? Like, should they try to diversify all these different categories? Or like, could there be too many, not enough? Like how might they approach this?
Yeah, I mean, with anything with the college application, I mean, I'll be the first to tell you, like, it's really tricky to figure out like what schools are looking for, right? And on the flip side, right, I will happily share with you, like, there's no perfect formula, right? There's no this many extracurriculars will make sure my student's a competitive applicant, gets admitted to the school of their choice, or not having an extracurricular means that they're going to be denied. It really is dependent on the school, the student, the round that they're applying, or there's so many things involved. So I think my kind of like I said earlier, my gut reaction is to just have them explore what they're passionate about. And if they haven't quite found it yet, especially if they're in their first year of school, that's okay. Right? Take the time. There's our in school and out of school opportunities. Sometimes things don't open up to students before their sophomore year, right? There's so many things at play here. I think what is helpful is if a student does find things to participate in, right? But they shouldn't be filling every single minute of their downtime, right? We want your students to live happy, balanced lives, right? To have time for comfortable enough time for homework, to have free time, to go out with their friends, to have fun and love high school as to the best of their ability. And then whatever they can do extracurricularly should be things that add to that enjoyment and that fun. And that translates in an application. Now, folks might not believe me, right? When a student's excited about what they do or what they want to study, that is very apparent. And so it is only in your student's best interest for their high school involvement and time in high school, but also potentially in the college application space to just enjoy what they do. So I would not say to fill up all their free time. Please don't do that, right? Imagine your students also taking rigorous courses and doing lots of stuff in the classroom too, and then has that homework to bring home. But whatever they're naturally called to, whatever that looks like in school, out of school, hobbies versus extracurriculars, a blend can be just as compelling as a really concentrated fit, like we just talked about. But as long as they're passionate and about what they're doing and they have a balanced schedule, that frankly is more important to me, like as a human caring about students in high school, as it is also as an admissions officer and making sure students have, balance in their high school experience.
All right, great. That kind of ends my like pre-thought of questions, and so I'm going to try to dive into some of the questions that were submitted. And there was a few questions related to volunteer hours, right? So another thing that goes on college application and into scholarships, and how do colleges look at volunteer hours? So like I will say right now we don't have any required volunteer hours to like graduate. I know some high schools have that, so if you're looking at a school that everyone had to do 25 hours, you might maybe say, okay, well, that was kind of required, but it's not required here. So it would truly be volunteer, hours for the most part. So how do colleges maybe look at volunteer work versus an activity versus a job? Does volunteer work boost, their, application? is it shown more favorably than any of these other things, or how is that kind of viewed in the whole process?
Yeah, I think students' perspective, and really just anybody's perspective on volunteer work when it comes to college admissions, I think has shifted pretty drastically over the last 10, 15, 20 years. I think it falls for us, and I think a lot of folks would speak this way, depending on the institution, right? Because there's some schools that have that high priority on community involvement and service. So there might be some slight tweaks to this perspective. Um, is that it falls into a category of anything else your student might be doing. And they shouldn't be doing it because they think it's going to look good to a college, because again, that can come across pretty quickly that this is not something a student's genuinely interested in. They may come to love it, which is great, right? You know, so not a lot of students may be initially inclined to doing service work. That's fair. Or might be a part of like National Honor Society, right? Or something like that. That's mandated. But it can be just as compelling as anything else. And it is not more compelling than anything else. I think it can be just as much of an hourly commitment. We see students who do like 500 hours of service over the course of their high school career, and because that's something they're really passionate about, and that's how they, connect with their community. And it can show us again some great qualitative traits about that student, but we can also get those that showing of value of community and those qualitative traits from a number of different things too. So great if your student's interested, but I wouldn't say it's worth prioritizing over other engagements they might be interested in too.
Okay, great. I'm trying to go through, I'm looking up at my other screen here to see like some of the other, pinpoint some highlight things. So one of the things I might go a little bit rogue from what I sent you here, but kind of no matter what the student does, as they're putting those things on their application for those of parents who don't know yet, on Common App you can list 10 things, and the recommendation is always put your most important ones top to bottom. But the tough part is you only have 150 characters to describe what you did during that thing. And so we want to tell students to utilize that space to the best that they can. So don't just put like I was on the football team and then description, member of the football team. Like you just wasted like half the characters doing that. So what are you looking for in those descriptions? Are you looking for certain traits, certain does everyone can't be the captain of the football team, or they can't all be the president of student council? So like obviously those are things you'd want to highlight, but like is there certain other things in general you're looking for in that involvement instead of just like member of? Like what else can students like do in those activities to like be able to highlight why this is important in the college process? If that made sense.
Yeah, this is again also a tricky area because you're like, what do I put in here? Right? It's student council. Shouldn't they know what student council is, right? I would say that I think just a pro tip is it doesn't need to be proper English, right? If it's just really like kind of brief summarization, like bullet point type language, that's okay with us because we recognize again you only have so many characters to use, and putting in periods and commas and adverbs and whatnot eats up that language and eats up those characters. So know that it's not a priority for you to have fully fleshed out descriptive language in this section. But it is a space to provide, again, context. It's just going to be a huge reoccurring theme throughout the application process. So there are some things that are going to be really intuitive, right? You'll be able to put like the position that you're in as a student in that general header, right? Captain, football team, right? President, student council, right? That's built into that overarching kind of activity. So that description section should be clarifying what you're doing in that role or in this organization. Even maybe why it's important to you. I see students, but like, I love connecting with my community, right? As kind of an adjunct at the end of their description, like service, for example. But it's especially helpful for things that we may not know about, right? Like I'm fairly familiar at this point with Hersey, right? I've worked with your students for several years now. But let's say one of my colleagues is involved in the process, reading the application, they might not be as familiar. So that context and that kind of sub description describing what the Hellenic Club does, right? Activities that are hosted, right? Or I manage cooking all the food each week, right? perfect, right? That tells me how you're involved, potentially why the number of hours that you put down, how that's reflected in what you're doing. But it helps clarify for those that might be familiar or new, or just as a reminder, what you might be doing in said activity. But on a personal level, here's what I do, but also here is what this organization does can also be very helpful.
Right, because we don't want. There's no point in just being in something and just being there. Like you're not going to get as much credit for like just having a pulse in the like sitting in a chair sleep. Like part of being involved is being involved, like actually be involved, and then of course if you highlighting that what you actually did, not just like a list of things, but what I actually did. Um, interesting couple interesting questions. Is there ever a reason to not list all of the things they've been involved in? Now, I just said Common App has a max of 10, so I guess one quick answer could be, well, it doesn't fit. But is there any like other reason maybe that someone shouldn't put something? And then on kind of the flip side, do colleges verify what you do put on there? And how so?
Yeah, so for to that first question, I would say there's no like immediate thing that comes to mind for me is like, oh no, don't put that on the application. I think it's more about, again, the application is the crafting of your student's story, right? Their experience of high school, their experience during high school years, and as close to a summary or understanding of who they are as a person, which is a huge ask. But we always try to encourage folks to celebrate that time, right? Celebrate your students' accomplishments in this application. So my kind of gut instinct for, okay, if I were to think of some things that maybe wouldn't be worth putting on, are things that weren't positive for your student, right? Let's say a student was involved in a club for a couple years and it ended up just ending really sour, or, they ended up having something happen during that year of school that just totally changed the course of their high school experience. And it's tied with that sort of extracurricular in a not positive way. I'd say leave it off, right? Focus on the positives, focus on the things that they're enjoying. If it's something that's taken up a lot of time, they can maybe still include it, but they don't have to, right? They never have to be putting things in this section. So if it's not something that they're excited about or have positive affiliations with, then I think that's an okay thing to leave off. I think it's also okay to leave off things that a student was briefly involved in, right? Let's say you're trying out a bunch of stuff that first or second semester of school, nothing's really sticking, so you were like in 2 meetings for an hour a week for like 3 weeks, right? That's okay to leave off the application, right? We want to, I think on the flip side, we want to know the things that students passionate about, what they have been invested in time-wise, energy-wise, and have them share that with us. And with the verification, I feel like verification's been coming up a lot this year for whatever reason. I think often there isn't a formal verification process going through. Again, I'm familiar with your students have available to them. So if I'm looking at applications, think usually if something comes up that I'm like, I've never seen this, or this feels out of place, I'll reach out to Mr. C, or reach out to their individual counselor. I might do some research on the school myself just to like double check. But again, it's never in like a punitive way. It's just like, okay, I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, right? Is this, actually a really cool thing that's new this year that I want to know about as I'm looking at other applications? But usually we'll try to use the resources provided by your school to get that understanding, whether that's a person or just like info online. But that very rarely, if at all, happens, at least in my experience.
Right. And I think sometimes like when you're asked to break down how many weeks and hours a week and all that, students kind of panic and they're like, oh my God, like I don't, well, if it's this amount, and then they like think that you're gonna like check down to the minute. And so
no,
if you're doing it honestly, to the best of your ability and it's close, then you shouldn't have a problem because you are signing off. The student is signing off that this is all true, what they're putting. You don't want to lie at any point in the process, but if they say, oh, like, yeah, I was in Greek club and it was, 40 hours a week, you can be like, no, it wasn't. So it's, like blatantly, wrong is obviously going to raise a red flag possibly in some questions versus, if you said 1 hour, 2 hours a week and it was really one, well, like that's probably not, not a big deal. Another interesting question is we're actually out of time. So, but I just want to cover a couple really quick things. Is there a way to determine how colleges view or take into account participation in like a specific thing? So, if you are like really in band, like, is there a way to know like certain colleges that are really looking for people who are involved in band, besides obviously being maybe recruited by like the marching band person, or that have scholarships for those activities? Like, is that like easy info to find, or is it more the colleges searching them out? How can you take this maybe one area of passion and figure out like who would really want me?
Yeah, so I think if it's the case of something really specific, a school will let you know. And the best way and the easiest way to let you know is on their websites. So I think it's always as you're looking for schools that are a good fit, your students interested in, check out their websites because usually they'll call out qualities that they're looking for, right? Like we put, we're looking for students that are this, and that, or here's some academic areas that we're looking for successful applicants. But if there's something that's outside of those kind of traditional things on the website, it would be there, right? We're looking for students who are creative, right? Well, if you're creative, then maybe there's some sort of art scholarship, right? Or arts, we're looking for students with specific art experience. So the website is a great place to start. If it is not, you still want to double check. This is a great question to email an admissions officer. We're here to answer your students' questions, especially the ones that can't be found on the website, right? So that's why I say check the website first, do a little bit of research. If you're not finding it or it's unclear, reach out and say, hey, I was on the website. Have your student reach out. Hey, I was on the website. I'm really involved in band. I want to double check. Is there any sort of like band program or scholarship that would come into play in the admissions process? Really easy question for us to answer and helps you all get the information that you need, maybe determining if you apply to that school in the first place. So I would say check the website first and then ask. No harm in asking, even if it's just to double check.
Reaching out to someone like yourself. We just did a Learn a Latte last month with another college rep on how parents can interact and students can interact with college admissions reps and kind of what you're here for. So definitely, as we talk in a lot of generalities, overall, if you do have a specific question about how a certain school might be, looking at certain things or what they may have to offer, definitely reach out to those schools and those admissions reps specifically. So lastly, if you're a parent of a sophomore or a junior, you hopefully had some time now to settle in and kind of understand like how high school works, and maybe you found some things and you're still kind of going around. But what would your kind of advice be to a freshman who's just starting out? You kind of talked about it. I know one question was like they're still kind of getting acclimated. It's still the first like month and a half. Like, do they need to get involved like now, or can they just kind of wait and see how things are going? Is there a time where it's too late to get started, including senior year, right? Like seniors filling out their Common App, it's due in 4 weeks, and they're like, not involved in anything. Like, let me go join 4 clubs. Like, is that like, well, wait a minute, you didn't do anything until October? Like, should they even forget that, not even bother? Or kind of the timeline maybe of, it's okay to wait till this point, but at this point, maybe, it's you're just faking it for the application, to be honest.
Yeah, I would say I think from a freshman student, like it's okay to take time. That would be my advice, right? I think when students come to me and say like, can I do research in my first year at WashU? I'll say yes, right? But we want you to also learn how to settle into college and get your resources and get your footing before jumping into a bunch of potentially demanding extracurricular activities. And I'd say the same applies to freshmen in high school, right? It's a change of academics, it's a change of social structure, of schedule. They might be commuting longer. And so take time. They're totally okay to take time, settle in, learn how to high school, and then jump into extracurriculars. And often by finding those communities, finding people, settling into their classes, they'll naturally find the things that they're kind of called to. And if he doesn't start sophomore year, that's okay too. Or start until sophomore year, right? Having that time to just like settle in and get your bearings is more than okay. Again, we've seen with COVID-19 students not do activities for like 2 years and still be really competitive students. So there's always context, and I think one of the inherent contexts is you're just starting high school, and so you're not doing 17 clubs that first year. That is okay. And just explore what you're passionate about. That would be my other piece of advice for those students. It's just like try things out, right? See what sticks. Go to the activities fair and see who seems nice, and then and maybe go to that club meeting, and that'll kick off their journey from there. As for seniors, I would say, in a way, it's kind of the same advice. Enjoy your senior year, right? Have fun. This is the end of your high school experience. We want our students, again, to be balanced and enjoy what they're doing. This should not be the time where they feel like they have to add like 4 activities to their plate, while they're also balancing college applications and AP tests and all the things that come with senior year. So adding more to that is not necessarily something that we're inherently looking for. And it does look a little suspicious if a student has done like 3 things all of high school and then all of a sudden their senior year they have 7, right? Like I'm like, okay, we keep in mind that broader high school context. And so that sort of lumping on of a bunch of different things can, say a number of different things to us, again, depending on the context of the student. But that doesn't mean they can't get involved. If they're like, oh, this is a new club this year, I'm really excited, or I started a club this year, I want to make sure to include it, then that's just as awesome. But again, it's about that context and how they use that description section, how it plays into the rest of their activities, the application. But so it's okay to get involved, but they shouldn't feel like they have to be adding a bunch of things right now just to seem more impressive on our end.
Great advice. Thank you so much. So we are like 7 minutes over. So I think I hit the majority of the questions, and I think we covered in some extent most of them. But if there was something we didn't cover, please feel free to reach out, and we can follow up with you. Of course, again, remind your students to come to the activity fair next Thursday during their lunch period. I put in some websites of the Megadoc, our YouTube channel, and as well as just our College and Career Center website as well, that has all kinds of resources. Thank you so much, parents and guardians, for joining us, and a special thanks to Morgan for joining us bright and early from WashU. This wraps up our Learn a Lot Day. I hope everyone has a great day, and feel free to reach out with questions. Thank you.